Welcome, everyone, to Identity Theft. Will it happen to you? Can I prevent it? I'm Maria Papitas with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, and I'm really pleased that you're with us today. I wanted to uh, share with you that, as I said, I work for a UD Cooperative Extension. I'm a family and consumer science educator and have been working in the area of consumer education and personal finance for quite a few years. And I am really pleased that together with Jennifer Tozer, who's the manager of family engagement at the Department of Health and Social Services in the Department of Developmental Disabilities, along with Ed Gutzeit, who is a wonderful community and volunteer, works with Cooperative Extension and many other organizations. We've kind of put together this series. This is the last in the series, but we're so pleased to kind of work together to bring this to you. Yeah, and so I just want to start right out and start talking a little bit about what is identity theft. And identity theft is when it's pretty straightforward, right? Someone takes your personal information without your knowledge and commits some sort of fraud or theft. And it is the fastest growing area of consumer crime and really one of the most difficult to resolve once it takes place. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit about how big a problem it is, right? And so every year, the Javelin Strategy and Research Organization does a study, and this is some of the information that they found from 2019. Actually, they reported it in 2019. It's 2018 data. But there was $16.9 billion stolen from 14 and close to almost 14.5 million consumers. And this was up in terms of amount stolen and actually a reduction in the number of victims. And they say that there's a reduction in the number of victims because between that 2017 and 2018 timeframe, we started to use more credit cards and debit cards that had that chip technology in it. And they are finding that that is really helping to deter um, identity theft and the number of victims. Uh, there was an increase in what is called new account fraud losses. So what's a new account fraud loss? So a new account is when someone steals your identity and opens a new account. So that might be a new credit card or um, a loan or kind of creates a new account under your name. And so they have focused on, as I said, credit cards, but also things like loyalty and reward programs, and increasingly, unfortunately, retirement accounts. And what they're finding is criminals are becoming really good at undermining and kind of doing workarounds that authentication process, and especially with people who are using mobile phones. Mobile phones are a little bit easier to attack and get data from than our computers. So those are kind of some of the trends that we're seeing. And so now I'm going to share just a few slides that kind of outline some examples, right? The way identities are stolen and then can also be used, right? So one of the ways identity can be stolen is the first one here is when police or people pretending to be police call and ask you for things like your credit card numbers or the pins to stolen cards, right? And so they're pretending to be official and are wanting kind of that next step of information that that will allow them to then use those stolen credit card numbers. Another example, and this unfortunately happens a lot and oftentimes out of necessity, but a grandmother or a parent uses a grandchild's or child's social security number in order to set up utilities. And the reason they might do it is because their credit is so poor that utility company won't issue them credit, won't let them turn on an or create an electricity account, as an example. And so they use another member of the family's social security and information so that they can access reports, or sorry, utilities. So, officially that is really considered illegal, but we know for some families that is happening. Another example is, in this case, it was a country club clerk with access to records from the country club who went into those records and stole some identities and then brought them home, and mom used them to apply for multiple credit cards in that other person's name. So those are examples. Another example is when social security numbers are disclosed to inappropriate uh, employees. So that may be um, as simple as when we go in for a medical, appointment, and they're asking for financial information, including our social security number. Um, as an example, there may be credit card applications that are asking for social security numbers. And, at some level, those applications or those individuals in those offices are using that to connect, right, our information that may be in their database to kind of verify who we are, right? But one of the things that I have found is I have stopped offering, right, my social security number or putting that on applications where I'm not sure of how that information is going to be handled, right? So I have taken a step to be very protective of that number. So much to say, like, do you even really need that number? And oftentimes I get the answer back, no, it's just really for our records. This last one here has to do with what's called internet skimming. And internet skimming is when a message comes to you through email, and they're asking for you to verify information or click on a link, which would then enable that crook to access information that may be stored in your computer. And at the very extreme, they can kind of kidnap your computer and add malware or software onto your computer without you knowing, and then eliminate your ability to even access and go into your computer, and they kind of hold it for ransom. So that's sort of an extreme, but in terms of identity theft, we need to be careful about those things that we click on, because sometimes those things that we click on will access information that is on our computer. And before, when I was saying, and there has been an increase in hacking or skimming of our phones, it is because there isn't some of that software that's built in that helps to protect the phone. It's not at the same level as some of our computers. And so thieves have been able to kind of hack information off of our phone more easily than they can hacking it off of our computers. So that's something to really pay attention to. And that has a lot to do with like what network you're working on or you're using. And so I hope you all know that whether you're on your phone or your computer or an iPad, to be very careful of using those technologies in areas where you're using public network. right? When we're home, we have our own networks and our own Wi-Fis. But when we're out in public, there are those public networks, and those can be easily hacked and will not have the same protections as those that we use at home. So no matter what device we have, we need to be careful. So oftentimes I get the question, well, who is doing this? Who are the thieves? And so this same study kind of looked at who are the thieves, right? And so one of the things they found is about a third of the victims um, who had new accounts opened in their name knew the thief. So what does that mean? Well, that means maybe it's, family members. It may be people who you've met, like that person at the country club or that doctor's office. It could be someone who comes to the house, right? If you have a house cleaner or um, a painter or somebody who's coming to do repairs, we need to be careful of where our information is and what we leave lying around. We don't want people to be able to just pick up our wallet, for example, and write down the numbers. They may not steal the wallet, but they might write down the numbers on your credit card. So 34%, a third of new accounts, when new accounts were opened, we knew the thief, the victims knew the thief. 52% of those victims of the new accounts and other frauds were victimized by a family member. So this is someone they knew, right? So sibling, children, you get it, cousins, right? They actually knew the victim, knew the thief. And then only 18% of victims of the kind of fraud called misuse of existing cards knew the thief. And so what that means is it's really this sort of fraud is usually conducted by people we don't know. So this is when, for example, a data breach happens and our information then is used by the crook, right, to use existing credit cards or accounts that we already have and access it and use them inappropriately. So what happens, right? How do they use our information to cause fraud, right? Well, they may open a new account, as Patrick and Benjamin mentioned, and also Carol, right? Buying property in someone else's name. That's kind of big, right? So they open a new credit card account and they're using that name and date of birth and social security number. Another thing they could do is just go on spending sprees. So they're using your card and your information and they're just buying those big ticket items. Now, this is one of the areas where I think the banking industry has gotten better. I know for my own self and experiences, had someone tried to purchase a computer and within 5 minutes of the purchase, I got a phone call from my bank to say, hey, did you really buy this? And I could verify, nope, I didn't. So it's that spending spree. They go out and use an existing card. One of the other things that happen, and Benjamin's story is illustrative of that, is changing the mailing address on your credit card account, right? And so now all of that correspondence doesn't even come to you; it's going to some other address. And if you're not paying attention, then you're not even going to see that that something is different, right? I know for my own self, time is just floating by, and some days I don't know what day it is or what month it is. Um, and so to kind of keep paying attention about, well, when is that bill supposed to come, and have I paid it? And it's sometimes very difficult with the way um, uh, time is flying by, right? But paying attention, are the bills coming? Here's some other things, right? Taking out loans, and we had an example of that: student loan, a mortgage, a medical, right? They're taking it out in your name. They might try to establish phone or wireless or internet service in your name. Um, Maybe even issue counterfeit checks, right? So they open a checking account, they get checks, they start using checks or debit cards, and then draining your bank account. And so at some level, um, uh, uh, Patrick, the fact that the bank kind of closed down those accounts really helped to protect them, as challenging as it probably was to prove that they were really your account. On the other hand, they really helped stop a thief from draining those accounts. And so it's that whole notion of, accessing accounts and draining them, but they could also be opening new accounts and then writing bad checks. And then ultimately they could rent an apartment, you get medical treatment, um, uh, or pay their own bills, right, in the victim's name and using the victim's resources. So what else? They could commit crimes and with kind of your ID, and then police come looking for you, um, obtain government documents, get a job with your ID, um, you know, uh, and over the last couple of years, there's been issues around um, accessing tax information and getting the refund that you would have been able to get, but because they changed information in your tax records, they get the refund. And then more recently, there's been a lot of work that they've been trying to access retirement accounts or social security accounts or even trust accounts. So all of those are the horrible types of ways that identity thieves can really mess up our finances and our credit. So, what happens, right? And we heard a little bit of this from our storytellers today. It could take a few weeks or several months to straighten out all of the information and get access to your accounts. And so it takes time. And sometimes, opening those new account, when a new account is opened, it can take longer to clean up because you don't even know they exist. And if it wasn't for like that letter that comes in the mail or a phone call that kind of verifies that this account exists, or looking at your credit report, you kind of don't even know. And so it does take longer to kind of find out and then fix it. The other thing that happens is that that your identity is then linked with that criminal, right, who has personal information and your social security number. And so that that can go on a long time, right, unless that criminal is caught. Um, One of the things that many people do is they'll put fraud alerts or victim alerts on your credit bureau files. And so right now it's taking a little bit more time to process, to make sure that by the credit bureaus, just to be sure that the identity is verified. Um, and then there could be out-of-pocket costs depending on the issue, right? From zero, um, which is really the majority of these kinds of situations, to thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on the kind of loss, but also the kind of legal uh, uh, situation that you end up in order to kind of fix things for yourself. So, what else? Things like your credit score is damaged. You'll have trouble getting credit in the future. You might be harassed by collectors. You might try and open a loan in the future and reject it because that bank or that loan officer is looking at your credit report. You may have banking problems. You could have utilities cut off. You could be rejected by insurers. There could be a file, people suing you for money that they think that you owe them. And then, of course, there could be things like a criminal investigation, and then just overall feeling terrible, right? I mean, this is not a fun thing to go through. And so doing everything you can to prevent it is really, really important. So what happens if you discover that you're a victim? Or not so much that, but how do you discover it, right? It could be there's credit charges that you didn't make that you're not recognizing. You get a phone call from a collection agency. You're denied credit when you apply legitimately for credit, or your that debt ratio, your credit score is really low because of the bad behaviors of the people who have stolen and used your credit. Um, as we mentioned earlier, the mail might stop coming, and so you don't receive your bills. And so that may be a sign. You receive credit cards in the mails for which you didn't apply. You look at your credit report and you maybe see some things that are inaccurate or wrong. Or you might even try and use your health insurance card and it's not accepted. So all of those are
Mm.
clues, right? As well as some of the stories that both Carol, Patrick, and Benjamin shared. So the next thing, is, what do you do, right? What do you do if it happens to you, right? Obviously, you want to close those fraudulent accounts, the accounts that you didn't open, and try to clear your responsibility of any of those debts. You'll want to go back in and check that credit report, make sure it's correct, find out as much as you can about the suspect so you can inform the police and the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. Especially if back in the beginning when I said, almost a third of people knew their the person who stole their identity, and almost half, a little over half, found out that it was someone within their family, right? So to me, that's one of the things that you can begin to work with the police on to figure out, well, who was it, right? That stole your identity, and then you can take additional steps to protect it. And obviously, all of those are strategies then you can use to develop a plan of action. Oops, what do we do if we are a victim, right? So one of the important things really is to file a police report, because depending on the nature of the theft, uh, it is a proof of crime. So, okay, maybe it's one credit card and you've kind of figured it out, and it's resolved with the credit card company. But what if that thief comes back around and tries to open another one, or even access a different kind of credit or your bank accounts, right? By having that trail, by having that police report, then you've kind of created that proof, right? The ID theft affidavit is something that was developed by the Federal Trade Commission. They are using it to kind of track cases across the country, and they can help close
Okay.
unauthorized accounts and get rid of debts wrongfully attributed to your name. And so they have started this process of encouraging people to fill out that affidavit. It also helps them to kind of see the bigger picture so that if they are seeing trends, they can then try and pull those trends together and use federal efforts to protect more consumers and shut down, say, identity theft rings. The other thing that you can do is really contact that creditor and look for documentation that can prove that you're a victim. So before I mentioned, right, signatures on applications, that is one of the ways people can prove, hey, that wasn't me. That's not my signature, right? So kind of working with that creditor, and maybe their fraud department or their member services department, and really trying to figure out, what do they have, uh, and is there a way to prove that it wasn't you? And so that becomes part of that police report, and your documentation to say, nope, that wasn't me. So what do you do, right? So the first thing you can do is contact the police, and show that you're acting diligently, and then it actually allows you to get a complaint number. And so if it ever becomes, say, an insurance issue, right? So say someone spends $50,000 in your name, it could become an issue for your homeowner's insurance, right? And certainly your homeowner's insurance could be something that then they're going to need, a police report and kind of all the facts as they investigate it. So getting back to your question, Carol, is that I would have a conversation with your homeowner's insurance and see if they cover um, this kind of identity theft and losses associated with identity theft, as opposed to getting additional insurance. Step two, right? Report the theft to the credit bureaus. And then you might get a fraud alert or put a freeze on your reports. And this is the 800 numbers. This is in one of the handouts that I sent to you. Get a copy of your credit report. Since COVID happened, we can now get free credit reports once a week from each of these credit reporting agencies. The previous law was once a year, one each from each of these reporting agencies. But since COVID hit, we can get them once a week. And so again, free. So that's a strategy, right? Especially if you feel like you're in the throes of an identity theft situation. If you haven't had an identity theft situation, I really encourage you to get a copy of your credit report and review it, and try to do it, twice a year, right? And look for errors. And if you find errors, right, you want to follow up in writing and make sure that things are correct. And certainly if you find anything that looks fraudulent, you want to certainly report that. So as we talked a little bit earlier, there are these two things that we can do with our credit report. One is put a fraud alert on it. And a fraud alert allows creditors to get a copy of your credit report as long as they take steps to verify your identity. And so that may be good if you're stopping someone from opening a new account in your name, but it may not really prevent misuse of your existing accounts. To kind of monitor your existing accounts, you have to look at those statements, right? And make sure everything's correct. A credit freeze is kind of what we talked about before, and that is that idea of restricts access to the credit report altogether, so that people makes it difficult, right? Identity thieves can't open new accounts in your name because the credit report information won't even go to the lender. These also stop, the credit freeze also takes you off the soft inquiry list, meaning your name won't be sent to a lender who would then turn around and market to you, hey, here's a product that we have for you that you might be interested in. Okay, what do you do next? Step three, right, is all about connecting with the fraud department of the creditors, the bankers, the utility, the cable companies, making sure that that they know that your identity has been compromised. You want to try and close all of those accounts that have been tampered with. Check accounts, make sure they haven't been affected by a theft, meaning have they withdrawn money? Have they, like in the case of a utility, have they changed the address? Have they accessed services or additional services that you aren't willing to pay for, that you don't need, those kinds of things. And certainly you want to submit in writing any illegal charges in your accounts and ask for copies of those transactions or applications to really, help you build the case that you're a victim. This step 4 has to do with the Federal Trade Commission and that victim kit and the affidavit. That can be found on the FTC website. It can help them, right? The Federal Trade Commission kind of monitor things from a bigger perspective and help you, answer your questions and help you through any process that you might have to go through to clean things up. How do you guard against, and protect your identity? Being careful with your financial and personal information. That means, whether it's, kind of the paper versions of things, right? Receipts, bills, things that end up in the trash or come in the mail, either shred them or burn them or, go online, get things sent to you online and not necessarily keep the paper trail unless it's for tax purposes and you need the paper trail. You want to be sure that you're using secure websites and software and making sure that your software that is on your phone and your computers are up to date, and keeping an eye on and watching for emails that might be phishing. Don't carry really valuable information in your wallet or purse. Just carry what you need to. And I really encourage people to maybe make photocopies of what you carry in your purse or your wallet, and keep that in a secure place at home so that if, for example, your wallet is stolen, you know what was in your wallet and all the numbers on those cards and things like that. You want to be sure you're dealing with reputable vendors and pay attention to those bank and utility card statements. Keep an eye on those billing cycles. Let's see, what else can we do? We can be selective about who we give information and what information we give at those professional offices. As I mentioned before, not responding to emails that ask you to verify information or pins. It may also be a phone call, and just hang up on those people. Make sure your virus protection software is strong. Change your passwords, especially if the company that you're doing business with, if there's been a data breach, and use what's called two-factor authentication. And we're seeing more of this, whereas you might log in on a website and then it says, okay, we're going to send you, a 6-digit PIN on your phone and use that PIN then to continue your login. And so that makes it's a strategy that some businesses are using to kind of ensure it's really you that is accessing the website. You want to look at that credit report and make sure that information is correct, that there aren't any accounts or inquiries that you didn't initiate. Make sure there isn't any unexplained debts, on your legitimate accounts. And then make sure that information like your social security and your address is correct. I have met many like Mary Browns and Jim Smiths who say, I've got great credit, but Mary Brown across Route 95 on the other side of Wilmington, she's got terrible credit. So especially if you have a common name, you need to be paying attention to that as well. So when it comes to preventing identity theft, right? It takes a bit of time, and paying attention, kind of keeping track of information, and making sure that you're setting up a filing system to keep information safe and organized. You want to be a little bit paranoid, right? Ask questions and be cautious about who you're giving your information to, whether that's face to face or online. Make sure information isn't visible in your house or work or when you're out and about. And so by that, I mean, don't leave your wallet out if you're going to have someone come and be in your house who is maybe doing a repair, right? You want to use some prevention strategies, and you want to communicate with family members about strategies, the strategies we've talked about, but also things they can do to keep themselves and other family members safe. So, especially with the amount of time that young people are online now, there is an increase in kind of targeting young people. Um, and so because they're not as savvy, they're more likely to kind of get swept in. And so it's very important to help our young people who are online become savvy as well. So that's it in terms of my presentation.